Well, hello, and thank you for joining us for our monthly Facebook Q&A with Bishop Gaynor. Now, this is a time when Bishop sits down with us and answers your questions that have been submitted over the past month. Bishop, it's hard to believe that yet another month has gone by and we're doing another Q&A.
Indeed it is, yeah. The summer's end is here, huh? So time moves quickly.
It does, for sure. So our first question was submitted from Jerry. And Jerry is wondering, when will we be allowed to receive Holy Communion in both forms?
Good. Well, Jerry, thank you for that question. And I'm sure it's on a number of the minds of the faithful to receive Holy Communion under both species. And at the moment, it's not going to be restored, I would say, for the foreseeable future. You might notice at Masses, even when there's a deacon or a concelebrant, typically the concelebrants and the assisting deacons would drink from the same chalice that the celebrant uses. And we've even changed that practice for the time being, so that there's a separate chalice for the concelebrants and for the deacon, and they receive by way of intinction, so that no one is actually drinking from the same cup. We really want to follow, I think, an abundance of caution here. Studies have been done over the years regarding whether or not people have gotten ill or taken some germs, virus from the common cup. And it's never been established that that is a health danger. But given the difficulties of our present situation with the pandemic, we think we need to exercise this abundance of caution and just refrain from receiving from the common cup. It might be a good time for all of us to remember, though, the important teaching of our church regarding the Eucharist. It's called Eucharistic concomitance, and that is that the real presence of Jesus, body, blood, soul, and divinity, is present under each of the sacramental signs. So by receiving just the sacred host, at communion time, we're not receiving less of our Lord or some diminished presence. It is the full, real presence of the living, risen Jesus Christ giving himself to us in the Eucharist. So Christ is wholly present under each of the sacramental signs. And I think that's a good time for us to recall that. True, it is a better fulfillment of the mandate that our Lord gave to his apostles and to us at the Last Supper: take and eat, take and drink. It's a better fulfillment when we do choose to drink from the common cup of the precious blood. But nevertheless, by receiving under one form, we're not receiving any diminished or lessened presence of Christ. So for the time being, we're going to keep this restriction in place. And certainly, I want to restore that option of the communicant to drink also from the chalice of the precious blood as soon as we see it's reasonably safe.
Excellent. Thank you, Bishop. So following up on that, we have a question from Christopher. And Christopher's question has to do with that Holy Communion received on the hand has been preferred throughout the pandemic. However, he's noticed that some people are still receiving Holy Communion on the tongue. And he's just wondering why, if you could explain why that is being allowed during this time.
Surely. Well, Christopher, thank you for your question. And I've been, of course, most Saturdays and Sundays out into our parishes throughout our 15 counties. And there is a significant number of communicants who do come forward and prefer to receive the sacred host on their tongue. The reason, and we have during the pandemic recommended that if the communicant is comfortable with that it might be better to receive the sacred host in one's hand and then take it to your mouth yourself. However, that's only a recommendation, because in fact, it is the communicant's option how he or she wishes to receive Holy Communion. And so it is still a legitimate way and should not be denied for a person who prefers to receive the sacred host on his or her tongue. Having administered communion for years and years now, it's certainly no less contact, or no more contact, I should say, when I place the host on someone's tongue. You have to be careful in distributing Holy Communion that way, but many times people have cupped their hands, and you're actually coming in contact more, I find, placing the host in one's hand, because you're touching the skin of one hand, especially if the communicant has his or her hand cupped like that. It's very hard to place the host in there without coming in contact with their hand. So we do recommend receiving on the hand, but everyone has the right to exercise your own preference when you come to receive Holy Communion. So we have not, I believe there have been maybe some places that have restricted receiving communion on the tongue, but my conviction is that it is the option of the communicant, and so we've not restricted that at all. It's whatever person feels comfortable, what is the most respectful, devotional way to receive our Lord in Holy Communion. We allow that.
Thank you, Bishop. And then our last question, I know we've talked several times about the obligation being restored, and it has now been restored. It was restored on August 15th. But there are still several guidelines that have been announced that would still qualify a Catholic to be dispensed from that obligation. Could you just review what those guidelines are for our viewers?
Sure. And this is certainly nothing novel or innovative in our present situation, but our church has long-standing understanding that an obligation that can't be fulfilled no longer obliges. And that applies certainly to keeping holy the Lord's Day. And our church precept, the way that we've interpreted that divine command, the third commandment of the Ten Commandments, is to participate in Mass on Sundays, Saturday evening or Sundays. But if one is prohibited, if there's something that limits your ability to do that, then the obligation is lifted. So what are some of those conditions? Well, clearly, if someone is sick. Right? If I'm too sick, that again is an act of charity. Even if I could go, but I might spread the flu or whatever, or my cold, whatever it is, I should stay home. If I have a very serious anxiety about going in to church, and that I'm really preoccupied with the possibility that I might catch something, that would excuse. Someone who is a caretaker for someone who can't come to church. So you may have an elderly parent at home, a sick child, someone who's bedfast, homebound, and you can't leave that person. And so if you're the only caregiver within your home, you are dispensed from the obligation of attending Mass. So traditionally, there have been a variety of reasons why the obligation doesn't bind in certain situations. But it's a general law of the Church that an obligation that cannot be fulfilled no longer obliges you. So there are a variety of reasons. And I think, once again, we rely on everyone's conscience to make that decision and then be in peace with it. We certainly recommend, though, if you cannot come to church to participate in Mass, that you would take some time to keep holy the Lord's Day. So perhaps read the sacred scriptures of that day for the liturgy of the Word and reflect on them. Spend time in special prayer. Maybe even reflect on the passion and the resurrection of Jesus. And certainly we will still be, most of our churches, I think, live streaming at least one Mass from their parish, and so to participate by watching a live streamed Mass, as well as that personal component of your prayer, I think is highly recommended. So it's not just, I don't have to go to Mass, but we do want to hallow the Lord's Day. And there are some of the ways that I've just mentioned, a way in which we can do that if we're unable to participate in the celebration of the Most Holy Eucharist.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Bishop. That's all the questions we have for this month.
Okay.
So we really appreciate your time. We know you have a busy schedule, and we always appreciate you coming by and visiting and answering the questions that have been submitted.
Well, I'm happy, and I thank all of our listeners who send their questions in. It's grateful for the opportunity to address those, and I hope it was helpful.
Excellent. Well, if you would like to submit a question for Bishop Gaynor for our next Q&A, you can email it to communications@hbgdiocese.org. Send us a note here on Facebook, or always drop it in the comments. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.